The quarterback battle between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey is the one grabbing all the headlines, obviously. But that's just the beginning. Fall camp is going to be packed with high-stakes position battles from safety to the trenches, and we're breaking them all down right here on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. It is great to have you here with me on Wednesday, July 16th, and thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. This is your reminder to please subscribe on YouTube or follow on your preferred podcast app if you have not already. I really appreciate it, and it goes a long way in supporting the show. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, with fall camp set to kick off in just a couple weeks, which is really exciting to say, but also hard to believe, the Notre Dame coaching staff is about to make some major decisions that will shape the 2025 season for the Irish. Today, we're going to break down the most important position battles on both sides of the ball, from the quarterback competition that has everyone talking to some sneaky position battles in the secondary and in the trenches that could define how far this team goes. But let's get into the quarterback position and the latest there. We have obviously been talking about this battle throughout the offseason, and there aren't a ton of new updates since spring practice, but I think it's important to go over the big picture context as we sit here just a couple of weeks away from when these two guys will really go at it on the practice field every single day before the coaching staff picks a starter, and then they will start preparing with that one quarterback leading up to the season opener against Miami. So Notre Dame is about to start the season with its sixth different starting quarterback in 6 years. The last multiple-year starter at Notre Dame was Ian Book. In 2021, it was Jack Cohn. 2022, Tyler Buchner, then Drew Pine. 23, Sam Hartman. 24, Riley Leonard. So it has been a while, and as usual, the success of any season is going to depend heavily on the starting quarterback. And Notre Dame has championship-level aspirations in 2025, so it's not like they can just bring a guy in and try to just give him 1 year as like almost like a gap year or like a transition year for the rest of the team. No, when you have Jeremiah Love in his third and likely final season at Notre Dame, you have got to try and win the national championship. And it's a lot to ask for any first-year starting quarterback, but it has been done before. We have seen a lot of first-year starting quarterbacks come in and succeed right away and lead their teams to a championship. Look at Trevor Lawrence. He did it as a true freshman in 2018. As a matter of fact, he smoked Notre Dame in the college football playoff. And I remember in the lead up to that game, as I was sort of convincing myself and figuring out a way that Notre Dame could possibly beat that Clemson team, even though they were stacked on the defensive line and had great skilled players and had this stud freshman quarterback, I thought, well, no true freshman quarterback has ever won the national championship. And guess what Trevor Lawrence did? Just dominated Notre Dame and then dominated Alabama on his way to a national championship. We've also seen a lot of redshirt freshman quarterbacks succeed as well, and that is what Notre Dame is going to hope out of CJ Carr. Where things stand right now, it's a two-man race. It's CJ Carr, it's Kenny Minchey. At one point, it was a three-man race, but then Steve Angeli transferred just a few days after the spring game, and I think once Steve Angeli entered the transfer portal, I think it sent a sign to the rest of college football that one of these young guys, or maybe both these young guys, is really ready to play. And Steve Angeli knew that even though he had come in and played as the backup quarterback for the past 2 seasons and had more experience on the field than either one of those guys, it didn't really matter because CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey both have really high ceilings. And I think that he saw the writing on the wall, which is why he elected to leave and ended up with the Syracuse Orange. So both Carr and Kenny Minchey flashed throughout the spring, but neither one has separated yet. I expect this competition to last about the first 8 to 10 practices into fall camp. And then the coaching staff has to make a decision and figure out who's going to be the starter so that they can start preparing for Miami and then that game against Texas A&M a couple weeks after that. Neither one of these guys brings back much experience at all. In 2024, Kenny Minchey played 4 snaps, but he did have a rushing TD against Purdue. He played a little bit in 2023 as well, 13 snaps. Technically, for his career, he's 3 of 3 passing for 16 yards, but very limited reps. He has been around the team longer than CJ Carr has, but they have the same amount of time in Mike Denbrock's system because this is only his second year as the offensive coordinator in this term with Notre Dame. Last year, the only time we got to see CJ Carr on a Saturday was the final 4 snaps in that game against Purdue, but he has 5-star pedigree, clean mechanics. He's very advanced when it comes to decision-making for someone his age, and watching him throw the ball in the spring game was really exciting. Like, he made 2 great throws to the tight ends early on in that game, but then Kenny Minchey made some really nice throws of his own. So ultimately, what is going to decide the competition? Jeremiah Love recently said in an interview that trust is going to be a huge part in it. I agree. This includes trust from the coaching staff, but also the players. It includes leadership and mastery of the system, because the coaching staff has to trust that when you go out there and take the field, you know exactly what you need to do and you know what everyone else is going to be doing. But also the players have to trust you, that you can lead them, that you can carry them in moments when the quarterback has to step up and make a play. And who do the teammates trust to get them in the right play? Because obviously that is very important as the quarterback, and who's going to show the confidence to lead, not just manage the team. Sorry about the siren that's going off in the background here. But even though CJ Carr is young, he has shown some signs that he has that type of leadership in him, that he has that understanding of the offense. He's been described as a sponge when it comes to the film room and understanding the playbook and all that stuff, but I imagine Kenny Minchey is just the same. So trust is going to be a huge factor in who ultimately wins this job. It's also going to have a lot to do with consistency, like who can move the offense drive after drive, not just in flashes. Like if you have one great drive, but then 2 or 3 that just end up stalling out and you don't really get much momentum going there, that's really not all that great. As fun as explosive plays are, you need to be able to consistently move the ball in order to be an effective starting quarterback. So it's going to be about consistency on a drive-to-drive basis, and it's about getting in and out of plays, making good reads, and putting the ball in the hands of the playmakers, of which Notre Dame has plenty. They've got Jeremiah Love. They've got Jadarian Price. They've got more high-end receiver talent than they've had in years. So the quarterback isn't going to be asked to do everything, right? It's not going to be a situation where they have to run the ball all the time and also have to push the ball downfield. No, they just have to manage the system and then make plays when they need to. I also think that the person who avoids the biggest mistakes is going to have a serious leg up in this competition, because turnovers are going to happen, right? You have a young, inexperienced starting quarterback. It's going to happen whether it be CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey. These guys are going to turn the ball over, and there's going to be points this season where the quarterback is going to make a decision that makes you want to pull your hair out. Like, what were you possibly thinking? But that is just the nature of the position, especially when you bring in a new, inexperienced quarterback. So turnovers are going to happen, but as long as they can avoid the really bad turnovers in like key spots in the game or drive killers, momentum killers, just as long as they can avoid the game-changing turnovers. Like if you're being aggressive on 3rd and long and you're trying to get a first down and you end up throwing an interception, I think everyone is totally fine with that, right? But if you have a lead late and you're trying to hold that lead late in the game and you try to force a throw like Riley Leonard did against Northern Illinois when he pushed the ball downfield to Chris Mitchell, and then it ended up getting picked off by the Northern Illinois defender, and then they ended up converting on the game-winning field goal. Like, those are the types of turnovers that cannot happen for any quarterback. So as long as they can avoid those turnovers, I think the quarterbacks are going to be in good position, but ultimately it's going to come down to trust, consistency, and avoiding those big mistakes. So when you look at the situation now, what's the best case scenario? Obviously, I think it's if one of these guys, doesn't really matter who, as long as one of them seizes control early on in camp and it makes the decision easier on the coaching staff, I think that's better for everyone, because then there's not going to be a debate like who should have won the job. It's very clear CJ Carr should have won it or Kenny Minchey should have won it, and then they can start preparing for Miami with that person leading the offense. The worst case would be if neither one of these guys separates, the battle drags on later into the camp than anyone really wants, and that could even cause a divide within the locker room. I think if you look back to 2016, that is a textbook example of how not to handle a quarterback competition, when neither Deshaun Kaiser nor Malik Zaire could really separate in camp, and then half the locker room wanted Deshaun to be the starting quarterback, and then the other half wanted Malik Zaire, and then they tried to go out there with 2 QBs in the season opener against Texas. Like, that cannot happen. You really hope that one of these guys can separate themselves early and win the job. Ultimately, I do believe it's going to be CJ Carr who wins the job. I think he has just too much upside to ignore, and I think he's ready enough to justify it. It's not always going to be easy. It's going to be a struggle, especially early on, but I just have more faith in CJ Carr at this point in time. But I do believe that Kenny Minchey is going to play a role in this offense, regardless of whether or not he wins the starting job. I think he's going to come in some short yardage situations because he can run, in red zone packages because I think he is more of a threat in the read option game than CJ Carr. And we've seen it before, right? Back in, 2018 when Notre Dame started the season with Brandon Wimbush, but Ian Book would come in goal line packages. Like, I don't know if they're going to do that, but I do think that they're going to keep Kenny Minchey involved in this offense. And Denbrock is going to find creative ways to get both these guys involved early while the offense finds its rhythm. But ultimately, I do think that CJ Carr is going to be the starting quarterback for Notre Dame, and he's going to be the guy that takes this team to the next level at some point in the next 2 years. So the quarterback is obviously the biggest position battle on the team, but it is not the only spot with serious competition. Let's talk safeties, injuries, and one offensive lineman trying to step up in a huge way coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. All right, my pick for today's show. I was looking at some of the odds in Major League Baseball. So the Red Sox are plus 600 to win the AL East. They are currently third in the standings right now behind the Blue Jays and the Yankees, but they won 8 in a row heading into the All-Star break. It felt like they were going to sell once they traded Rafael Devers, but I actually think the Red Sox have a long shot to win the AL East, and I like those odds at plus 600. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, the next most important position battle is not going to get nearly as much attention as the quarterback, but it's still very important. I think it is the most important position battle on the defense, and that is for the field safety spot, because we know Adon Schuler is the clear-cut starter at boundary safety. He played 768 snaps last year, which was second on the defense, only behind Xavier Watts. I think Schuler is going to be the anchor of the back end in 2025, but now this defense has to replace all of those snaps and all of that production that Xavier had this past season, and that spot is really up for grabs. It is pretty wide open, I would say, compared to any other position battle on the roster, and is also very important. And I would expect more of a rotation this season to lighten the workload and adapt to different matchups. So even though it's an important position battle and one of these guys is probably going to get the majority of the snaps, you're going to see all three of these guys. And I say three because I do think that there are three legitimate options to start at field safety. I think the current leader right now is Luke Talich. I probably wouldn't have said that going into spring practice, but I believe he has the inside track as of now, thanks to a very strong spring's practice. He's a bigger body, 6'4", 209 pounds. He's physical and he's instinctive. He's been in the program longer than a guy like Tay Johnson and Jalen Stroman, the transfer from Virginia Tech, and he seems to have the trust of the coaching staff. He's not quite as explosive as the others, certainly not Tay Johnson level, but he's consistent and dependable, and I think he still has a lot to prove when it comes to holding up in coverage against elite athletes. But when you're that big and you're that reliable back there, the coaching staff is going to find a role for you. So I think that going into fall camp, Luke Talich is a slight lead for that spot, but look out for safety Jalen Stroman, the transfer from Virginia Tech. I think he was considered the likely starter before spring, but then it was revealed that he was going to miss all of spring practice because he's still recovering from shoulder surgery. He hurt it in game 1 last year against Vanderbilt when he was still with the Hokies, so he did not play at all last season, and he did not participate in spring practice, and those are valuable reps that he missed. It reminds me of last year when everyone thought, myself included, that Rod Hurd was going to end up starting at safety opposite Xavier Watts, but he couldn't participate in spring practice. Adon Schuler could, and then he won the job. I don't think it's a situation where Luke Talich won it going away, but I do think that he gained some serious ground, and that's why he has the inside track over Jalen Stroman at this point in time. The biggest concern is that he's really hasn't played any football, any Saturday big-time college football since 2023, but I do believe that he's a very talented player. A couple years ago, they were talking about him as like a day 2 NFL draft pick, but he just has not been able to stay healthy. So I do think he's going to be a very important piece of this defense, and maybe once he is fully healthy in fall camp, he just turns it on and really runs away with this thing. I could certainly see that given his experience and given what he did at Virginia Tech. He's a very talented player. It's just a matter of staying on the field and staying healthy. The wild card in all of this is Tay Johnson, the redshirt freshman. He is one of the most athletic players in the secondary and honestly the entire roster. He has legitimately freaky traits, and he was turning heads during spring ball with flashes of big play potential. And this could be another Don Schuler situation as well, because Schuler really took off going into his second season with the program after he redshirted his freshman year. Tate Johnson was hurt at the beginning of last season, did not make much of an impact, but once he got healthy, the coaching staff threw him out there, and he did all right. He was playing a little bit of corner. I think he's more suited to play safety, and considering his athleticism and his big playability, I could see him ending up winning this job. If he's able to put it all together, he could be a force on the defense and force himself onto the field. But I think the most likely option, or the most likely result for Tate Johnson, is that he comes in sub packages, maybe some obvious passing situations, but he could be a late riser throughout the season, someone who we don't see as much in the early portions of the season on the road against Miami and then at home against Texas A&M. But maybe by November, Tate Johnson really just accelerates in his role, and he ends up taking away some snaps from Stroman and Luke Talich. But it's going to be a rotation, but ultimately this staff is going to figure out which guy they trust the most, and that is going to be a very interesting storyline to follow. Another very interesting storyline to follow in spring practice is who's going to start at right guard. A couple weeks ago, this would not even been a discussion. It was going to be Charles Jagusah. Not only was he going to start at right guard, he was going to probably be one of the best guards in the entire country. But then he broke his right humerus, I believe it was. Yeah, that's the right bone. Riding in a UTV in Wyoming when he was there at Luke Talich's family's house with a bunch of other Notre Dame football players. And now that right guard spot is up for grabs. We still have not heard any more from Notre Dame about Charles Jagusah's status. There's some conflicting reports about when he's going to be back with the team. Some people say that it could be as early as October. If it is a little bit more serious, or if there are more complications, maybe it's not until November. So with Charles Jagusah being out for an indefinite period of time, that job at right guard is open. And to me, Sullivan Absher is the most likely candidate to fill in that role. He's played tackle, guard, and most recently center since he joined the Notre Dame football team, but I believe the staff likes him most at guard. The reason he was playing center is because Ashton Craig got hurt last year, and they needed a starting center. And I think it's pretty telling that the staff was willing to move Sullivan Absher to center because they liked him more than the other options there, even though that's not his natural position. And that's a very difficult position to learn. Like, you're going from a player who started as a tackle who now has to move all the way inside to center, which that alone, just that spot on the line of scrimmage is much, much different. And you have to add in the fact that you have to snap the ball every single play. It might look easy. It's not. So the fact that the coaching staff trusted him to do that tells you a lot about what they think of his ability and how much they want him on the field. So I do believe that he is going to be the starting right guard, but Joe Rudolph has taught us in the past 2 fall camps that whatever you think is going to happen probably isn't how it's going to end up, at least for the first game of the season opener. Like last year, no one was talking about Sam Pendleton starting at left guard, but that is exactly who went out there with the first team unit when they opened up the season against Texas A&M. So if the staff were to tinker a little bit, say they move Anthony Knapp from left tackle to right guard, because after last spring, going back to 2024, in his first spring with the team who's an early enrollee, it looked like he was more suited to play the interior. Now Joe Rudolph really likes him at left tackle, but given this injury, he's probably going to experiment a little bit. Let's say he moves Anthony Knapp to right guard. He excels there. Now you have another position battle open at left tackle. Conventional wisdom would suggest that Gerby Lambert could be an option, but he's recovering from a torn labrum that he suffered in spring practice. So could it be true freshman Will Black? Certainly a possibility. 5-star recruit coming out of high school, tons of talent, super high ceiling, but is he going to be ready to start as a true freshman, even though he didn't even early enroll and has not even practiced with this team yet? It's certainly possible. We've seen Notre Dame players really come out of nowhere and end up just playing really well in fall camp, then earning a spot, but it's a little bit different on the offensive line. But there's so many things that could happen because of this one open spot on the offensive line. I still think Sullivan Absher is going to take it, but we cannot rule out anything when it comes to Joe Rudolph and what he's going to decide. Everyone is going to be given a fair shot. So Chris Tarrick, Joe Otting, like they're dark horse candidates. I don't think it's going to happen, but you can't rule it out. Or maybe Joe Rudolph gets real crazy and he decides to move Gerby Lambert to guard. Or maybe he moves Will Black to guard, because if this is a matter of getting the 5 best guys on the field and he trusts Anthony Knapp the most at left tackle, then he can try to train these guys at guard and cross-train them a little bit and get them ready for the season opener. Ultimately, I expect it to be Sullivan Absher, but we have seen surprises in each of the past 2 seasons, and Joe Rudolph is all about getting the 5 best guys on the field. And right now, We do not know who those 5 best guys are now that Charles Jagusah is out for the foreseeable future. So field safety is going to be really interesting. Right guard is now going to be entertaining. It wasn't supposed to be, but that is just the reality of the situation. And those are 2 very important position battles that I'm going to be following throughout fall camp. All right, up next, the battle in the trenches at nose tackle and the crowded competition at wide receiver. Who's breaking into the rotation and who's getting left behind? That's next. So going into this offseason, obviously the biggest question mark about this team was who is going to be the starting quarterback. But I said at the very beginning that the second most important question is who is going to replace Howard Cross and Riley Mills on the interior of the defensive line. Well, at this point, it seems like Gabriel Rubio is pretty set to start at defensive tackle. He has the chance to be really special this season. He's got the size that Notre Dame needs at that spot. He's 6'5", 322 pounds. And even though he's not explosive as Riley Mills was, we got to see a heavy dose of Gabriel Rubio in the playoffs once Riley Mills went down in that game against Indiana. Like, Rubio was out there starting against Georgia and Penn State and Ohio State, and I thought he did really well in those games. I would like to see him improve at getting after the passer. He only had 1 sack last season, didn't register a hurry outside of that, according to Pro Football Focus. So if he can improve in that regard, I think that Gabriel Rubio could end up having a really strong season for the Irish this year, because last year was so tumultuous for him. I mean, he wasn't even with the team during spring practice, was not even a student enrolled in the university. Then he comes back and immediately gets hurt at the start of fall camp. So it felt like he was kind of coming from behind the whole year, but now he's been with the team, he's been healthy, and the team is really going to rely on him early on in the season. But who is going to replace Howard Cross at nose? I assumed it was going to be Jared Dawson, the transfer from Louisville, who looked really good for the Cardinals at the end of last season, but they might like him more at defensive tackle behind Rubio. Now, it's important to point out that defensive tackle is a position that rotates maybe more than any other position on the roster. So even though there's going to be a starter, these guys are going to rotate frequently, but you would like to see 3 guys probably separate themselves and really take a step forward this offseason, in particular fall camp. So in the spring game, Notre Dame sent out Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye as the 2 guys at defensive tackle, and Jason Onye has really impressed since he returned to the team. He's bigger, he's stronger, and he's a leader of this defense. I think that he has a real chance to start, which is definitely not something I would have said going into the offseason. And I think another thing that has to happen is Jared Dawson needs to be a little bit more consistent day in and day out in practice. He's been around college football for a long time. He has not played for a program like Notre Dame. All due respect to the Louisville Cardinals, but the expectation for a player of his caliber, someone who is expected to be a starter or at least be a key piece of this defense, requires you to compete every single day and every single rep. And I'm not sure if Jared Dawson has shown a willingness to do that just yet. That could certainly change, and maybe he really figures it out and comes out with his hair on fire in fall camp and then ends up winning that job. But he has so much talent and he provides so much experience and size on the interior that Notre Dame really needs Jared Dawson to step up. But if he doesn't, you know that a guy like Donovan Hinish is right there behind him. And even though he's a little bit undersized, he's a really good athlete and he's going to do everything you ask of him. So Notre Dame has some quality options at defensive tackle with Gabriel Rubio, Jared Dawson, Jason Onye, and Donovan Hinish. But Marcus Freeman has said that they're going to rotate 5 or 6 guys. That's easy to say during the offseason, but what happens when you're, say, down a touchdown against Miami and you need a stop on defense? Are you really going to be willing to rotate 5 or 6 guys? My guess is probably not, unless Armel Mukam or Elijah Hughes end up taking a big step forward and they force themselves onto the field for 10 or 15 snaps a game. Marcus Freeman has said that they can replace Cross and Mills in the aggregate with 5 or 6 man rotation. I'm a little bit skeptical. I think that there's certainly some talent there, but can they bring it on a consistent down-to-down basis? That is yet to be seen. I think ultimately it's going to be a 4-man rotation between Rubio, Onye, Dawson, and Hinish, and then Mukam and Elijah Hughes will get in spurts. But Notre Dame is going to lean on those 4 guys, so they got to stay healthy and they got to take their game to the next level this season, because you need an elite defensive line in order to compete at the highest level in college football. And Notre Dame is really going to need those 4 guys to step up in a big way and really just take their game to a whole new level, because even though Howard Cross wasn't healthy last season and took a step back from the year prior, he was still a very good player. Riley Mills really came on during his last season with the team. So Notre Dame is going to need that, and probably a little bit better if they want to reach the same goals this season. The last position battle that I'm going to be looking at is not for the starting spot. It's going to be for the 5th and 6th wide receiver spots. And it is important. It might not seem like it. It might seem pretty far down the depth chart. But when you consider how long the season could be if Notre Dame reaches the heights that they want to reach and play 15 or 16 games, guys are going to get hurt at wide receiver. It happens every single year for every single team. So you need depth at that position. And that is something that Notre Dame has sorely lacked in recent years. You know who the top 4 are. Malachi Fields, Jaden Greathouse, Will Pauling, Jordan Faison. But who is going to fill out at 6-man rotation? You've got KK Smith. It's kind of now or never year for him. He's going to be a junior. He's dealt with injuries throughout his time at Notre Dame, and he had a real chance to separate himself in spring practice. He didn't do it. Mikey Gilbert was a player that I was really excited to watch in spring practice. He ends up getting hurt in like the first drill, misses the entire spring session. Really unfortunate for him, but I do think he's going to be in the mix very much during fall camp. Elijah Burris, early enrollee, true freshman, who turned a lot of heads during the spring, partially because no one really had that high of expectations for him immediately, but given the fact that a lot of those guys at the top weren't able to participate in spring, Elijah Burris had an opportunity, and he seized it. But is he going to be able to play a lot this season? That remains to be seen. Last year, Micah Gilbert was a big-time player in spring practice, had 2 touchdowns in his very first blue and gold game as a true freshman, barely saw the field as a true freshman. Is Elijah Burris going to be able to take what he did in spring practice, build on that, and then force his way onto the field? It's possible, but ultimately I think it's going to be KK Smith and Micah Gilbert who round out that 5 and 6 spot for the wide receiver room, but there's a couple of dark horse candidates to keep an eye on. Logan Saldate. I bought some Logan Saldate stock last year, and I'm keeping it. Mike Denbrock is really high in him. He has raved about him, and I think that he is going to surprise some people because even though he's undersized and Notre Dame already has several good options at slot receiver, Logan Saldate is a really crisp route runner. And if he can get open, he can create separation. He's got good hands to move the chains. He's going to find his way on the field. Personally, I'm selling some of my Cam Williams stock, not all of it. I think I'm trying to save some for a little bit later on, but I don't think he's going to factor into the rotation this year. I'm hoping to be proven wrong because I think Cam Williams has a ton of athletic ability that you can't really teach, but he has to figure out all the other aspects of playing wide receiver, understanding where you need to be on every single snap, being consistent, not dropping the football, attacking the football with your hands. That is the stuff Cam Williams needs to get better at. Maybe he's figured it out during the summer, comes into fall camp, and really just starts to shine and become the player that everyone was hoping he could be as a high school recruit, borderline 5-star out of Michigan. But I think the safe bets are Micah Gilbert and KK Smith. KK Smith has the experience, and I think Micah Gilbert has the ability. I just really hope for his sake that he can stay healthy because it would not shock me if Micah Gilbert really took his game to the next level and started to move his way up to maybe even like the 4th wide receiver spot because he has that much natural ability. So even though this is not a fight to be the starter, whoever ends up being the 5th and 6th wide receiver on Notre Dame this year will have a big impact and they will be counted on to make plays. And it's just a matter of who is going to step up so that when their number is called, they provide another option for whoever wins the starting quarterback job. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And if you like today's breakdown, leave a 5-star review and drop a comment with who you think is going to win these fall camp battles. I'm going to be back on Friday with Luke Smith to catch up on the offseason, hear what he has to say about all the good vibes around Notre Dame football lately. Plus, we're going to have another Top 5 Friday in store. You're not going to want to miss it. I'll see you then.